Hi, I'm Dillon, and you're listening to the Animals at Home podcast. Joining me today is Kyle Chalmers of the Instagram account KC Critters. If you are an Olympic fanatic or someone that follows swimming closely, you may recognize Kyle's name as well, because he is the 2016 Olympic gold medalist in the 100-meter freestyle. He's also an Australian, and Australians love their swimmers, so Kyle is a very well-known athlete in Australia, and it was an absolute pleasure to have him on the show. In the episode, we discussed the growing collection of animals that he currently has and how he cares for them, especially with such a busy schedule. We discuss all the rules and regulations that Australian herpers and reptile hobbyists have to deal with that if you're in North America, you probably aren't aware of, and it is actually quite impressive how many rules and regulations they do have. And he also tells me about an experience he had in Japan where he visited a Reptile Cafe. I really do hope you enjoy the episode, and make sure you go to Instagram and follow Kyle at KC_critters. If you'd like to support the show or you have an idea for an episode, please visit animalsathome.ca/podcast for more information. Wow, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Sorry, it's taken a while.
Oh, no worries. I know you're a very busy guy, so it's and the time change makes it a little bit tricky.
Yeah, it does. Definitely makes it that one a little bit harder.
Yeah, although this is a good time for me because it's the afternoon here, but I guess we're both used to waking up early, so it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's the good thing.
Well, so obviously I knew your name because I was a swimmer as well, so I'm familiar with who you were, but I had never connected your name to the reptile hobby, obviously. I guess a couple months ago, I have a Animals at Home Facebook page, and I quite often post just random news articles that I find on Google. And then I guess maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, I stumbled across, maybe it was like a local Adelaide paper that was writing about you and your reptile collection. So I was like, oh, that's cool, because I don't know if it's like this in Australia, but North America and Canada for sure, keeping reptiles is definitely kind of weird. So, and according to like the mainstream people always, I almost refuse, like I don't like telling people I have reptiles a lot of time, because you kind of have to go through the same, like, oh my God, why do you own those and what do you do with them type thing. So it's always nice to see a public figure, and obviously you're a well-known athlete in Australia, and you're kind of coming out with a giant collection. So that was awesome to see. So how did it all start?
Well, I grew up in the country, so Port Lincoln, which is about 7 hours away from Adelaide. And my summers were probably spent catching reptiles with my grandpa especially. And I was lucky enough to have a little bit of land. So there was quite a few, Bluetongue skinks and shinglebacks and bearded dragons and that sort of thing, in quite large quantities over there. And, I guess that's where my passion did start for reptiles, quite young. And that's something my grandpa had done his whole life. Obviously, back in his day when he was quite young, he didn't have to have, reptile licenses and that sort of thing. So he was kind of able to do it with ease. It was always catch and release for me, but was more so just getting up close with the reptiles. And like I said, I just always kind of had that fascination for them. And I think my mum and dad discovered that, and I think when I was about 5 years old, maybe they got me a few bearded dragons. So I think I had about 4 pet bearded dragons, and a couple of turtles and a couple of green tree frogs, and then so yeah, that's probably where my fascination did start. And like you said, it's probably is kind of that weird community, the reptile keepers, and I used to kind of try and hide it a little bit, like I would not so much speak about it, to everyone or to media or that sort of thing. And I had my Instagram as Adelaide Bluetongues, and no one kind of knew who I was. But it got to a point where I was just like, you know what, like I'm super proud of this, and I love reptiles and love what I do. So I changed my Instagram handle to KC Critters and changed my name on there to Kyle Chalmers. And since that happened, it kind of really took off, and I got that media exposure, which again grew my Instagram following. And but yeah, I guess the main thing is just there is quite a large range of good reptiles to keep as for Australians, especially as pets. And they, like a bearded dragon, doesn't require a whole lot. Like it's very easy to keep in an enclosure rather than having a dog that runs around and shits everywhere. So so I think for me it's more, I guess, that educational side. Like, yes, I do love having some pretty cool mutation Bluetongues and pythons and that sort of thing. But I really do enjoy the whole having people come over and pull out a 6-foot python and be like, look at this thing doesn't want to kill you and it's not slimy, and it's just as cool as any other reptile, and it doesn't actually want to hurt you. So I think my mum was totally against having snakes growing up for me. That's why it took me so long to get a python. And now that I've got one, and she can kind of see how dog tame it is, she quite likes it as well. And I've managed to get her to hold it. And it's the same as my grandma. She's like 70 something now, and 73, I think, and never kind of always had that fear of snakes and pythons. And it's something that I'd love to kind of get out of her, is that fear of something, because, you live your life without fears. You kind of, it's just an easier way. If you don't have any fears in life, you can kind of just get through it a lot easier than always being worried about something. So yeah, I guess that's where my passion came. I think, Port Lincoln is a small country town, like I said, and we had the community of 15,000, and we'd have the odd reptile dude come into kindy or school just to show off some native animals, and I was always up the front holding crocodiles and frillnecked lizards and the pythons that he was bringing in at the time, and I guess that's where I really developed that love for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think the story of your the mom being afraid of the snake, like that's such a common story in our hobby. And my mom was the same way. It was like, you're not getting a snake. Like, she's okay with the geckos, but the snake is like no go. But everybody warms up to them once, like you said, once you see that it's not going to kill you and it's not going to eat you. And a 6-foot python sounds huge, but when you see it, you're like, oh, that's actually not that big. Like, once it's not like a huge anaconda that's going to swallow you or something. And so that's interesting. So when you're catching the wildlife with your grandpa, are they fairly easy to catch? Like when you're doing some catch and release type things?
Yeah, Bluetongues and shinglebacks are super easy. They'll kind of, because they're not obviously the fastest animal, they'll more so stop and become really defensive. Like, obviously shinglebacks have that. They look like they've got two heads, which is their defense mechanism. So they'll kind of go into like a U shape and I guess try and warn off their predators to so they don't know which one's the head. But obviously, I've got a bit better eyes than an eagle, so I can see which one the head's on. But yeah, and then they'll kind of just flick out their tongues and open up their mouth and make themselves look a bit bigger by blowing themselves up. And as long as you kind of get them around the neck, like your two fingers around the neck, then it's a pretty easy job. But yeah, so those guys are pretty easy to catch, and you see them, back over there crossing the road just everywhere. Like, there's just that many of them getting around, which is good to see. And bearded dragons are obviously pretty similar. They'll most of the time be up trees or garden posts or that sort of thing, and more so just sun bathing and getting that heat, so you can kind of creep up on them a little bit. But once they're on the ground, it's always pretty hard to catch because they're quick animals. But
yeah, they run pretty fast.
Yeah, they are very quick. So especially when they've been sitting under the sun warming up for a while.
So even in Australia, the reptile hobby is still kind of like a little bit weird for the mainstream people.
Yeah, definitely. It's still quite weird. There's not a whole lot of, I guess, people with reptiles. I think it's growing. Like, there's definitely, I'm in a lot of pages on Facebook, and there seems to be more people joining the pages quite regularly, but it's definitely a weird hobby to be in.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's why it was kind of cool that you came out with that article, and, because I could totally relate to wanting to not really talk about it, because people tend to think like, oh, why would you own reptiles? But that's pretty cool. So then obviously at some point in your reptile hobby career, you started breeding, I guess.
Yeah, last year I had a few clutches of bearded dragons, more so unexpectedly. So I always had a fascination with probably more so breeding Bluetongues, just because there's so many cool morphs out there now in Australia. And they require a bit more time than bearded dragons in regards to getting them up to size and giving them the exact right conditions, whereas bearded dragons over here just breed like rabbits. So I had a pair of Aki monitors, so ridgetail monitors, And I had a mate that wanted to trade a few bearded dragons for him because I was kind of just over him, like they just hit all the time and I'd never see him. So I was like, oh, yeah, sweet, I'll trade it for beardies. And yeah, I didn't even realize that it was a male and female pair. He didn't. He told me they were all females, and yeah, before you knew it, she laid a very small clutch because she was quite a young girl. She laid four slugs, which was a bit of a shame. Um, and then yeah, within probably a month or so, she had her first clutch of about 10 eggs, which was cool. And then yeah, she popped out another clutch later on in the year. But yeah, having those baby beardies was very awesome. Obviously, I do want to get into breeding in some capacity. Like obviously the Bluetongues I've done all right with this year. I've had I probably have about 5 females gravid at the moment, which is exciting. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of at a point where it is cool having 30 Bluetongues and 30 knobtail geckos and a heap of each thing. But it is cool having awesome display animals that people come in and kind of go wow. So for me, over the next probably month or so, it's more about setting up my room to have those cool display animals and or have my animals out on display. Like the moment I've got 3 baby frillnecks out on display, and I'll get some green tree pythons in there. Got a Mertens water monitor and a couple of eastern water dragons in enclosures that people can see into. And the bearded dragons are always good animals to have out on display, and they're very easy to handle, and they love being handled, it seems. So they're another animal that are out on display. But otherwise you just kind of keep everything in racks and you never see anything, which is the hard thing, and people can kind of never comprehend that. But if you're breeding, it's the easiest way to store animals because you can store so many animals in such a small space.
Yeah, and it obviously there's some hygienics too that comes along with keeping things in a rack when you're trying to keep animals healthy. And I think your room seems to have a nice mix of doing some breeding as well as some of those display enclosures. And one thing I actually didn't realize, I had interviewed another Bluetongue skink breeder in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTube channel Reptile Mountain, but
Yeah,
he's
got you.
yeah. So I interviewed TC a couple, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and one thing I didn't realize, because I don't follow Bluetongue skinks very much, but I didn't realize that in North America we don't have nearly as many morphs as you guys have in Australia, obviously because of the restrictions on like the deporting the animals or importing animals here, I guess. And so when I'm looking at your page, as like there's Bluetongue skinks that I've never even seen before, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is cool, and I think that's the unique thing about Australia is we can't import or export animals. Obviously, there's been some of that happening illegally, and I know that there's quite a few morphs that have somehow made their way over to Europe, and then I think there's some that have got into the United States. Like I think there's has an albino Bluetongue and maybe a couple of hypermelanistic Bluetongues, which are the jet black. So I think there's definitely people that get picked up all the time exporting reptiles illegally because there's obviously huge money in it, and which is so sad, and it's something that kind of shatters me, especially when I see, overseas that there is an albino Bluetongue that somehow has rocked up, and like obviously it can happen, and obviously it's a wild occurring thing in albino, but yeah, it's yeah, it is hard, but it's good that I've kind of got that collection now, and I know that it's a very unique collection because it can't be anywhere around the world pretty well legally. So
Yeah, that is. So is that
now.
was that the impetus to start your Instagram page? You had all these interesting skink morphs, and then you thought I just post it on Instagram?
Yeah, definitely. So I had all these skink morphs, and I was like, oh, well, I just take all these photos and kind of have them all saved on my phone. And well, there's like, I might as well have an Instagram page where I can just at least store them all and look through them myself. If it takes off, it takes off. But yeah, that was my reasoning for it at the start. Was just I had all these photos and kind of know where to post them. So would have been maybe this time last year almost I started my page, and yeah, it's got quite a good following on it now, which is awesome.
Yeah, has it just recently had like a pretty big jump? Because I swear like maybe 2 months ago it was like 3,000 followers, and now I just checked today and it was over 12,000. Or did that just happen?
Yeah, I think obviously changing my name to Kyle Chalmers and then probably pumping it up that little bit more in the media, and yeah, there's very easy ways to grow Instagram followers by liking and commenting on people's photos and following other people and using hashtags and all that sort of thing. So, I spend a lot of time doing that just to try and grow it up, because the more people engaging in Australian reptiles, the bigger it's going to grow and the better it's going to be. So, we have quite a limited amount of reptile hobbyists in Australia compared to the United States. So, yeah, my aim is to grow it up that little bit more, and so I spend quite a lot of time on my Instagram page, liking and following and everything like that, and so yeah, that's why it has grown that little bit quicker, quite well over the last couple of months.
Yeah, that's always nice to see. So right now, do you have a number of how many animals you have in the reptile room?
Oh, I'd say I'd have about 70.
When someone hesitates.
Yeah, I reckon there'd be about 70. They're quite and changes quite regularly because I am into trading and that sort of thing. And like I've got some reptiles that are out on breeding loans, and I've got some reptiles that are in on breeding loans, and so I'd say that I'd own about 70 reptiles across maybe 14 different species. But like I said, there's always things coming in and out, and it's my number one passion. So.
Well, the thing that I like about your reptile room, and I was going to tell you when I talked to you that I wanted to see more pictures of your reptile room, although you just recently posted one, I think last week. So I was like, oh, that's nice. Because your reptile room is so organized and the tanks are so clean. And it looks like you've actually done some effort in terms of decorating it too. Like the room looks nice, which I really appreciate, because it tells me that kind of reflects the animal's health as well. I think when you see someone that has like a totally disorganized, messy room, you start to wonder like how healthy are those animals going to be. So obviously you take some pride in that.
Yeah, I do take huge pride in it. Like yesterday, I would have spent probably 3 or 4 hours out there just cleaning, and that's probably every second day is probably clean day. I just make sure that I pretty well spot clean most of the time. Like as soon as a lizard does a shit in one of the enclosures, it's got the gloves on and it goes out straight away. And but yeah, obviously all my Bluetongues are kept on paper, so that's a constant battle of cleaning all that out because it stinks pretty quickly in there. So, but yeah, like you said, I do take huge pride in it, and I do like to show off my reptile room. So that's why I like to keep it as clean as possible. And yeah, I've got a fair bit of greenery in there and that sort of thing now as well. So it kind of is almost like my mini reptile zoo, and it's a great escape for me, especially during training, because I'll probably swim for 40 hours a week, and other than that, I can't really fit in work or study into that. So the lizards for me is probably my escape and my kind of relief, and something I enjoy doing.
Yeah, no, definitely. So do you have someone that helps you with the room?
When I go away, my girlfriend has helped me in the past. Obviously, she's a swimmer as well, so it kind of depends if she's going to be around or not. But my grandparents are right into it as well. Like I said, I kind of got into reptiles through my grandpa, so he'll quite regularly fly or drive to Adelaide and spend the week at my house just looking after the reptiles. Or my mum and dad will also help when they can't. So it's that's a handy thing, is having people that are able to assist you. But yeah, I try to go away as minimal as possible now, just to make sure that I can be there. And I hate missing out on things reptile wise, like just the finest things. Like when I was away recently in Japan, my girlfriend picked up Merton's water monitor, and I was just so shattered that I missed out on going to the airport and picking that up and putting it in its enclosure for the first time and watching it feed for the first time. And yeah, the simple things like that is what I quite enjoy. Like watching an animal eat and knowing that it's doing well is what kind of gives me that pat on the back, and that's my probably makes me happy type thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the tricky thing with being a swimmer. I mean, I know you're probably traveling quite often, and even me, I only have 5 animals, but I leave all the time as well because we travel as a coach. I'm traveling, and I like my girlfriend. I live with her, and she can somewhat take care of them, but she's also kind of scared of them. So I always freak out. I have like this list of things and just like, this is what you need to do. Like watch these two things. So
yeah,
I can't
that's the hard
imagine.
thing.
Yeah, like having 70. That's is the room in your house or is it outside your house?
So it's out the back of my house. So I had everything at my house, which was okay during the summer. But as it started to get cooler, I had them in the garage, and like it was kind of concrete floor, and I just couldn't control the temperatures as well as I was hoping for. So I moved everything to my girlfriend's house, which is about 100 meters down the road, and she's got a granny flat out the back. So it's carpeted, insulated. It's got a heater in there. It's got a fan, air conditioner. So it's got everything I need to be able to control the exact temperatures I'm looking for in the reptile room. Obviously, each reptile has its own specific temperature and humidity it needs to be kept at, but at least I'm able to kind of keep that room warmish, so it's not as hard to heat the enclosures and racks up.
Right, exactly. So what are some strategies that you use to just maintain like an organized system? Because I know that you have a whiteboard. It looks like there's some like specific things written on there, but because you have so many animals, you must have something that you do to keep yourself in track or on track.
Well, yeah, obviously the whiteboard's more so for my weight. So I got into a habit of weighing my Bluetongues once a week just to make sure they were putting on weight, especially leading into breeding season and obviously hibernation. I wanted to make sure that only the biggest Bluetongues were hibernated because I knew that they'd be pretty well ready to breed. So that was more so just keeping track of those guys and obviously their genetics that they've got, because all of them have got up to 3 genetics in them, and it's hard to keep track of when you have 30 Bluetongues exactly what genetics in what lizard. So the whiteboard comes in handy, and I've got other dates on there, like just dates of when my beardies were born last year, or when the geckos were born that I've got now, and but yeah, I think I'm just in a really good structure of every second day. So today's feed day for me, so I'll go out there and feed everything. Tomorrow's cleaning day, so I'll go out there and clean everything, and it's just kind of every second thing, and it's just in an organized or very, very organized, so it takes me as minimal time as possible because I've got everything set out, so I know, so that I can clean the whole 22, what is it, 11 racks. No, there's 2 racks, so they can hold 22 Bluetongues in them, and I can clean that in about 20 minutes just because of how organized it all is out there, and how many times I've done it now. I kind of have really got it down packed. But yeah, when I go away, I try to make it as easy as possible for obviously whoever's looking after it. And luckily this time when I was in Japan for 6 weeks, most things were still in hibernation, so probably half of my room was sleeping and kind of didn't really need to be maintained that much, just kind of the odd check on. But yeah, just in regards to having food in the freezer and or the fridge, and the rats and that sort of thing ready to go for the snakes, and the crickets there ready as well, and being delivered to my house so that my mum and dad don't have to go out and buy them. And it's just the simple things that make it run successfully. And like I said, I spend as much time out there as I can because it is my probably stress relief from swimming. Obviously, there's a lot of stress that comes with professional sport, and for me to be able to go out there in between training sessions, or after I've had a bad session in the pool, it kind of takes my mind off of everything, and makes me just think about the reptiles and make sure I'm doing the best job possible to keep them happy and alive.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that is actually the kind of nice thing about reptiles is they can be fairly easy to take care of in that sense. Like you can kind of leave them for a while, right? If you're going to be away, they can handle being, somebody just sort of checking in on them once in a while. They don't have to be like seriously taken care of every single day.
Yeah, definitely. It's great. Especially pythons, you can feed them once every couple of weeks, and they'll be fine. And as long as they've got a big bowl of water so they can drink out of the water. But even still, they're not huge water drinkers. They more so gain their moisture from the rodents that they're eating. So I make sure that my rodents have got that little bit of water on them just to make sure they're getting a bit of hydration as well. But and as long as they've got the right heat, and they've got that bowl of water ready, you can come back in 2 weeks' time and they'll kind of have done their weekly poo, and they'll be ready to have another feed. But you can get away with being away for a couple of weeks, whereas some of the reptiles like bearded dragons and frillnecks kind of need that little bit more maintenance in regards to being fed that little bit more often, and frillnecks need a bit of a spray here and there just to suck down some water. And same with knobtail geckos, like it's kind of every second day you want to put crickets in there, because otherwise the crickets end up eating their shits that are in there, and then
And just
the
horrible gut
geckos eat
load.
the crickets. yeah, the geckos eat the crickets, and then it's just, that bad cycle that you don't want to get into. So you want to be chucking in, 3 or 4 crickets per gecko every second day, and it just yeah. So when I'm there, it's all run exactly how I want it to. It's just the fact that when I go away, I think, like you said, your girlfriend's not overly keen on it, and my girlfriend's probably pretty similar. Um, so yeah, it's always a bit of a battle getting her out there as much as I'd like, but she does it because she knows how much it means to me and how much I love it, and that's what probably keeps her going on it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I saw that you had just recently got those frillneck lizards. Hey, that was like maybe 2 weeks ago. So that can you keep those? Can they be cohabit? Like, can they cohabit for forever, or eventually do they have to be separated? Because I know you have three in one enclosure, right?
Yeah, so they can. So I've got a male, female, female trio. So as long as it's that sort of trio, they'll be fine. Obviously, you don't want to keep 2 males in together because then there'll be fights. But obviously, they do get quite big, especially the males. So eventually, there'll be a point where I have to separate them. And especially during breeding season, it's always good to have the male separated from the females, just so you can kind of see when they've locked up and know when to expect eggs. And then, once she's laid her clutch, then introduce the male again, sort of thing. But so that's probably the plan at the moment. But for me, I've had 3 dream reptiles my whole life: a freshwater crocodile, a green tree python, and a frillneck lizard. So to finally get the frillnecks, was very exciting, and they are they've been hand raised pretty well, so they're very tame. And within 24 hours of them getting off the plane, I was hand feeding them, and they're just like the most inquisitive and awesome reptile I've kept so far. So I'm pumped with them. And the green tree pythons arrived this week. It's just a matter of when I'm going to go pick them up because I'm a bit lazy with that. 2 more reptiles to the reptile room's always adds a little bit more onto my plate, but it's something I've wanted to keep forever. So I'm very excited by that as well.
Yeah, green tree python is definitely on my list as well. I think that's one of the coolest snakes. So did you
Yeah,
get
definitely.
just a neonate? Is he just a little guy or?
Yeah. So he's an Australian locale. So obviously we do have the BX and the Indonesian type green tree pythons over here, which produce those red neonates. But they're very hard to come by. But one of my really good mates in Adelaide, who goes by Prestige Pythons, so Steve Crawford, he's got the pure Australian blooded green tree pythons and had a clutch last year, and he's helped me. You have to have a spear specialist license keeper to keep green tree pythons and frillnecks and Amier geckos and Willerai. So I've got a fair few specialist reptiles now. So Steve helped me get all that, and he's helped me get all my setups exactly right. So now I can kind of just put a pair of his hatchies in tubs for the meantime and wait for them to grow up that little bit. And I just can't wait to watch them change their color, and then eventually they'll get kept in quite a big enclosure together as well, just because you can keep male and female green tree pythons together, and they'll be sweet. So it's more just the visual and the aesthetic of the room. They
Yeah, it's
definitely
a
help with
beautiful
that.
display animal for sure.
Definitely
So
beautiful.
that's what I was going to ask you about the Australian bylaws, because that's something that in Canada and North America is not as strict, I guess. Although every city has its own different rules, but you guys in Australia, it's very strict. So you actually can you kind of explain just briefly what that's all about?
Well, yeah, it is very strict to keep reptiles. Like, you're only allowed to have one in your possession, and if you have any more than one, then you have to have a license. So you can just get your basic license, which you can keep as many reptiles and breed as many reptiles on that basic license, but it's only the basic reptiles like bluetongues and bearded dragons and a few of the goannas and the things that there's quite a lot of. And then the next step up is your specialist license, which I've managed to obtain just because I wanted to keep the Amier geckos, which is Australia's biggest knobtail gecko, and then the banded knobtail gecko, which is the Nephrus willerai. And I really wanted to keep those 2 species of geckos, so I got on to getting my specialist license, and then since then I've managed to get my frillneck specialist keepers permit and my green tree python, and so I can keep pretty well anything now. But yeah, there's quite a large process you need to go into to getting those licenses. You need to have referees and kind of do big reports on how you're going to keep the reptile and prove that you've kind of done the research necessary to be able to have it. Um, but yeah, like I said, each state kind of changes as well. Like lots of reptiles, you can't really ship things into Western Australia. Like they're very strict over there, I know. So they're kind of in the same position as you. Like they don't really have any of the Bluetongue morphs as of yet because they are not allowed to be shipped over there. And Queensland's cracking down at the moment, and just trying to crack down on people breeding so many reptiles, I guess. But yeah, it just depends on state to state. Like we're allowed to have freshwater crocodiles in SA, but Queensland aren't allowed to have freshwater crocodiles, which is weird because obviously Queensland is where freshwater crocodiles are, and they're not even allowed to keep them. So it is just really dependent on state.
Well, it's interesting because I guess it's kind of like a double-edged sword where part of it kind of, I'm sure those licenses cost money and you have to go through that whole process. But at the same time, it's probably good because you have to be serious to keep the animal if you want to keep the animal, right? You don't, because that's the one problem that we have in North America, I think, is we have a lot of very inexperienced people that shouldn't be owning the animals that they own, and they don't even really care about the animals. They think it's cool and they buy it, and then in a year it ends up on the internet for sale. And that probably wouldn't happen because I'm guessing you have to pay for each of those licenses, right?
Yeah, so I think it's about $160 a year for your specialist license. So it's pretty expensive, but also, like you said, there's a lot of people that kind of get it because they think that there's a lot of money in breeding reptiles, especially over your way with ball python morphs and all the morphs that you guys have got with everything. People go, "Oh, sweet, like this is an easy way to make money," but there's a lot more that goes into the reptile keeping than just breeding and trying to make some money. And but yeah, we have to keep our reptiles for a minimum of 6 months before we're allowed to sell them as well, which is another thing. So say I bought my green tree pythons and lost interest with them, I have to have them for a minimum of 6 months before I can resell them, unless you kind of ring up the government and have a bit of a complaint about it, because that's just the law, which is a good thing as well, because I think it probably turns some people off it.
So how do they monitor those? How would they monitor those sales? Like I'm guessing you could, if you want, like get rid of the green tree pythons, like in a black market sense, or do they regulate these things like very rigidly so you couldn't do that?
You could definitely do it. Like, I mean, there's people that do get away with it. I would never want to risk it, obviously, because of my name, and obviously my swimming is my number one thing. But like I said, you could get away with it, and but the biggest thing for me is I'm very up to date with keeping all my books and up to date. So they'll come over and check your books every now and then, or whatnot. And if we want to export a reptile out of Adelaide around Australia, you have to fill out your export permit. And if you're bringing another reptile into Adelaide, you fill in an import permit, and they have to kind of accept that. And they know what's going in and what's coming out of your collection. And you have to keep very, very up to date with all your books, because if they do a raid on you and you're not up to date, they'll pretty well euthanize all your reptiles, and you'll be done with that. So yeah, I'm very strict on making sure that everything's up to date. And but you hear about it all the time. Of there's reptiles over here that are American reptiles, and it's sad to hear that people want to risk that, or people want to get involved in that because it's an easy way to make a dollar. So yeah, it is a shame, but I think that's the way with kind of how everything goes. Really, there's always going to be that people pushing the boundaries and trying to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because that's very different from what we would be used to here. But it's kind of I can totally understand why the government wants to do that. You want to be regulating the species that are coming in. Plus, Australia, you guys do have some decently serious invasive species issues, right? And so I live far north, so it gets colder than I'm sure you could imagine. So we don't have invasive species issues in terms of reptiles, but so that is I think that's kind of cool for everybody from North America to hear, because I've never really had that explained to me fully. I didn't realize how many different permits there were. So
there's quite a few. It gets even more than that. There's a lot of permits you can kind of sign up for, but yeah, they're the ones I've got at the moment.
So is there I'm sure you have a few species on your list of wish list that are not species that you're allowed to keep, like outside of Australian species?
Oh yeah, like I would love nothing more than to keep a pied ball python. That's my dream animal. I know it's not the most exotic morph anymore. I watch YouTube all day. Like that's all I do. Watch Brian Barjack's everyday daily blog and Billy from Mutation Creation, so the Canadian guy, and just all these guys, Dave Kaufman, and just a whole list of guys that I watch their YouTube videos. And every time that the pied bull comes up, I'm like, oh man, the things I'd do to have that animal, but we can't keep him here, and we never will be able to. I think that there would come to a point where we'll be able to export reptiles, but we'll never be able to import just because the viruses that can happen. And I think pretty well any python or most reptiles around the world would be able to survive in some point somewhere in Australia. So
you have to be careful.
Yeah, so yeah, that's probably my dream animal that I'd love to get across here, but it's never going to happen.
Do you have any other dream animals?
Well, I think anacondas would be pretty cool to have as well, but obviously that requires a lot more than just a little setup for a ball python. But I think in Australia we're pretty lucky. I'm very passionate about having Australian reptiles and showing them off. And like I said, that's why I got the Australian form of green tree python, and that's what got me into it. But America have so many cool reptiles, and I think it's awesome that you guys can have the reptiles from all around the world. Like I was just recently in Japan, obviously in Osaka, and they have a reptile cafe there. And
yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, it was wicked. And, I got to play with an Argentinian tegu, and I was like, this is the sickest thing. And played with the corn snakes, leopard geckos, gargoyle geckos, and then chameleons. Like, obviously, my girlfriend fell in love with the chameleon, and that's something that, I'd love to have, but it's just never going to happen. So I just don't want to get my hopes up about it ever. So the only hope we have of ever having a pied reptile is someone randomly popping it out in some sort of species that we can keep here.
Can you explain a little bit what that Reptile Cafe was? Because I saw you post a few pictures, and I definitely heard of them before, but I cannot picture what that is like.
Yeah, it was a weird experience, but I jump at every opportunity I can when I'm away to see reptiles and see other things. So I've done quite a lot of zoo visits and back scenes type thing of reptile places. But when I was in Japan, it was kind of hard to come by finding places, and I just researched. I was staying in Kyoto, so about 20 minutes from Osaka, and I just wrote in reptiles in Osaka, and it came up with this reptile cafe. And it's obviously pretty hard, the translation, to try and work out what it was, but I looked at their Instagram, and it seemed that they had quite a range of reptiles there. And so pretty much we got off the train in Osaka and found this probably high-rise building, and one of the levels they just had this cafe, and we walked in and paid our fee, and so they sat us down in a chair, and there was enclosures and reptiles absolutely everywhere. And they breed and sell their own reptiles there, so they had snow corn snakes and albino corn snakes for sale, and leopard geckos, and just a huge albino ball python they had there for sale. And yeah, but pretty much then you just say which reptile you want to hold, and while you're sitting there drinking or eating or whatever, you get to hold whatever reptile you want of choice. Which for me, it was obviously it was definitely awesome holding the chameleon and those sort of animals, but I know that they shouldn't be held all day, so it was pretty hard as well for me to go, oh sweet, so this chameleon gets me to hold onto it for 5 minutes and then put back in its enclosure, then pulled straight back out for another person to hold. And it was a very busy place, so reptiles like those chameleons in there would cop a beating in regards to people holding them all day. So
yeah, what a strange concept.
Yeah, it is a hugely strange concept, and Australia would never ever be able to have something like that, just because the insurance you'd have to have on if a snake bit you or bit the person that's holding them, or I just like the whole fact that you can have food while there's an iguana sitting on the chair next to you. And it was a weird concept, but something that was really unique and cool, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I was in my element, and I'd never seen a ball python at that stage, never seen a corn snake, leopard gecko. It's like all these kind of reptiles I watch on daily vlogs that I have never seen, and to be able to hold them and just kind of see them in real life was awesome. And it's definitely made watching the YouTube videos way more interesting, because I know what they are.
Yeah, it's interesting because those are all just like the classic, pet species here. But as someone who's never seen them before, I can imagine that would be really cool. Like, I wasn't sure if you actually ate food and drank drank drinks while you were there. So but I guess you do. You can eat
You
and play.
can, yeah. I'm personally very big on my hygiene, so
Yeah, me too.
and obviously you have to being a reptile keeper. But so I had a drink there, but just a glass of water. But yeah, I think if you didn't know, well, like you didn't really care about your hygiene and stuff, then sweet, you could probably eat and drink as much as you wanted there. But you had to have some sort of drink. That was part of the deal to get in there. You had to buy something. So um, my girlfriend's sister was not keen on reptiles at all, so she kind of had a drink, and we just got a couple of glasses of water. And but yeah, like you said, they are normal reptiles you'd find in America, but we don't see them anywhere here, and they're not huge, obviously, display animals because you'd rather see a reticulated python than a ball python at a zoo. So it's not an animal you'd see in a zoo type setup. And but it'd be the same if you guys for you guys. Oh, actually, you guys have everything over there, so it's a bit different. But I'm sure if you came over and saw an albino bluetongue for the first time, you'd be very excited. And so yeah, I was just pumped with that, and it definitely made my day.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I mean, I love Australian species, so that's on my list. I have several Australian species that I'd like to eventually pick up. So, and I guess that's the one good thing about being in Australia is if you're going to have those restricted laws, Australia is the perfect place to be because there's such
Yeah,
a
definitely.
wide variety. And I saw that you also had one of your posts, maybe like a month ago. It looked like you had visited a Komodo dragon somewhere.
That was cool as well. So I was up in Cairns on a training camp, and I think, like I said, every time I'm away, I take the opportunity to see reptiles I've never seen. And up in Cairns, I hit up a few people that I knew through the reptile kind of community, and they put me onto the right people. And one of the days I went out looking for crocodiles in the wild, which was wicked. And then yeah, I went through this place called Hartley's, which is just outside of Cairns, maybe halfway between Cairns and Port Douglas in Queensland. Um, and yeah, we went through and I fed some crocodiles and held an alligator again, which was awesome because you don't see many alligators getting around in Australia unless you're at a zoo and you have that special license. But yeah, I guess, and then I got to hold a Komodo dragon that was just puppy dog tame, and I got to pat it under the chin, and it just followed me around everywhere. And it was the coolest thing. Like the dude was just like to me, pick it up and have a hold of it. It won't do anything. And um, he's there was a big kind of pool in there that the Komodo dragon could get in, and he goes, I come swimming in here with it every now and then. And he lived on campus there, and um, but yeah, it was one of the most incredible experiences. Obviously, not no one, I shouldn't say that, but there's very few people that kind of get to experience that sort of thing with the biggest land-based reptile in the world, and or lizard, I should say. So so yeah, I was pumped. It made the trip to Cairns well worth it, and then obviously a couple of weeks later, I held the chameleon as well. So I kind of ticked off two animals that are very very unique in their own different ways.
Yeah, that's a quite an experience. I can't imagine. Those are some big guys.
Yeah, they are huge. I couldn't believe how big they were. They were massive.
It's you probably can't, and you can't picture it when you look at a video or a picture. It doesn't do it any justice, I'm sure.
Nah, not at all. And I grew up watching Steve Irwin's videos and a huge lover of Steve Irwin. And I remember the video of him going to Komodo, the island of Komodo, and he had his special license to be able to go out by himself and tour around. And I remember seeing the Komodos chasing after him in food response and that sort of thing. And I kind of was a bit hesitant to go in there at first, but once the keeper had gone in and kind of showed me that it was all sweet, then I was all about it, and absolutely loved it.
And they actually, I mean, I'm sure most reptile people know this, but a lot of people who aren't reptile followers don't realize that they're actually like they have a venomous bite. So if they bite you, it can actually cause some besides the crazy teeth that they have inside them, but they can definitely cause some damage for sure.
Yeah, definitely, it would suck to get bitten by one. And I think, yeah, like you said, they've got that venom or that bacteria. Once they bite, it kind of just breaks down what their prey is, and they just kind of follow what they've bitten for a while, and then yeah, have a crack at it, whether it be a cow or quite a big species of animal, prey animal that they're chasing at the time. But over here they tend to feed them, little pigs and rats and rabbits and
Right.
that sort of thing.
Is venomous species something that you would ever get into, like keeping a venomous snake?
No, not at all. I think up in Cairns, I spent a couple of cracks with people that had elapids, so venomous snakes in their collections, and there's keeping reptiles, and then there's keeping reptiles. Like, it was extreme seeing, inland taipans, which is the world's most venomous snake, and king browns and death adders, and there's a few other types of taipan that they had in their collections. But seeing those and seeing them up close was enough for me, and it freaks me out a little bit. I think definitely the whole, what do you call it, venomous snakes still freaks me out, and I think that's probably why I like reptiles a lot, because I do have that slight fear for venomous reptiles.
Yeah, it definitely has a
but
bit
yeah,
of respect.
yeah, definitely. But again, like, they are stunning animals, and we're lucky enough to have the red belly black snake, which is one of the most stunning, probably, venomous snakes you'll see. And they're pretty easy to get your hands on, but again, you need to have a license to be able to keep them and handle them and that sort of thing. And they always have to be locked up in their enclosures, and there's quite a lot of restrictions behind it as well. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a whole
I
other
just think
game.
that I'm happy with what I've got, non-venomous wise.
Have you read any of Dr. Brian Fry's work?
No, I haven't. No.
I'm sure you'd like. He's an Australian like venom researcher, and I'm just reading his book right now called Venom Doc, and it kind of talks about different things that he does in his research. But he's someone I think he's in Queensland or something like that. But
Yeah,
yeah, the
most people are up in
university.
Queensland.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. Like, he's been bit by so many of these snakes that you can't believe it, and it's something that I would never get into either. But you can definitely respect their beauty, and it's amazing to look at them for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, yeah, they are beautiful animals, and it's something that I did enjoy looking at them. But yeah, I'll definitely look into that book. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, it's a very cool book. It's definitely a fun read for sure. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. I just wanted to see future wise, what do you have planned? I know obviously the swimming is your number one focus, and you're going to be doing that for, I'm sure, several years to come. And in terms of KC Critters, what do you have any future plans, or are you just going to kind of see how things go?
I'll see. Oh, yeah, like I said, I will see how things go. But I've brought out some merchandise, which has been cool, like just some t-shirts and that sort of thing. So they've been going really well as well. Actually, like, I ordered in about 40 of them, and they're already gone. So obviously people want to wear KC Critters, which is cool. But I think the next few months is just waiting to see if my Bluetongues have fallen gravid, and whether I'm going to be expecting some baby Bluetongues towards the end of the year, which is obviously something that I've probably wanted since first getting my first Bluetongue back in 2013. I've always wanted to try and breed them, and to maybe potentially have that opportunity this year. It'll be very awesome. So that's what I'm holding out for at the moment, just making sure the females are kept in the exact right conditions so that they hold on to those babies. And so yeah, that's probably my main focus at the moment, and just still growing everything up. Next year is probably going to be the big year for me in regards to knobtail geckos and the Bluetongues, because I'll have everything in my collection up to size next year, up to breeding size, and so which is exciting. So I think, yeah, for me, it's just still learning every day. I want to learn new things, and that's why I watch so much YouTube. It's just about learning, and I think eventually I'd love to open up a little reptile park in Adelaide. We don't have anything like that over here, but yet we have a real diverse range of reptiles in South Australia, and it'd be cool just to kind of have, even if it's just South Australian reptiles on display, it would be very cool. But so yeah, that's probably the next couple of things for KC Critters. And I love just going to check out other people's collections, and like I said before, learning and gaining that more knowledge every day. So I'll continue to do that, and yeah, just make sure that all the animals that I've got are having their best lives possible, and I'm keeping them in the best condition, so that they are more likely to breed, and that there's a lot of cyber heroes out there that kind of like to rip on your collection and rip on how you're doing things. But, I'm very happy with how everything is going. And I know that all my animals are very healthy and nice and chunky looking reptiles. So I know that I'm doing something right. So,
Yeah, well, it definitely looks that way for sure.
yeah, definitely. And, I don't have a whole lot of room for expansion at the moment. Obviously, I've pretty well filled out the room I've got. So, but I might get rid of a couple of racks here or there and just have more stuff out on display, just because it is way cooler being able to have people come through and see different color Bluetongues just straight in your face, rather than having to pull open drawers, and it's not as exciting that way. So yeah, that's probably the next thing, more display enclosures.
And in the future, I'm sure if you actually went ahead and did some kind of reptile zoo, that would be really neat. I'm sure you're watching Brian Barczyk's vlogs. You're seeing him open up his reptile.
Yes, definitely saw him open up the Reptarium or whatever he's calling it, which is something that I'd love to get over and see one day, like in my own eyes. And it's cool that Universal Rocks is was an Australian company, and they moved over there and seem to be doing really well as well. So.
Well, they've done a beautiful job on those things. Those cages and the decor in that room looks amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And last night they put up their cave entrance, which looks wicked as well. So, yeah, obviously seeing stuff like that, I've gone, oh wow, like Australia needs stuff like that. Like you've got there's quite a few of them scattered around the US. Like Brian goes around and visits most of them, and they're all unique in their own way. But we don't have anything really like that. We've got a few zoos that have reptile houses in them, but nothing that's just dedicated to reptiles. So that's one day I'd love to do something like that.
Well, if you do, I will come visit it.
Very good. That's what I like to hear. There you go. Someone's coming to visit already.
Cool.
Very cool.
Can you let everybody know where they can find your page, as well as if they want to buy a shirt or some merch, how they can go about that?
Yeah, so my page is just on Instagram, and it's KC_critters. And yeah, if you want to buy a shirt, or I'll do you a very good deal. I don't want to make money off of merchandise. I'm also just want people wearing my products to just get that advertising. So yeah, just send me an Instagram direct, and I'll be able to sort you out. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you very much for joining us, and maybe we'll catch up and do another one in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I had a really enjoyable time.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. What do you think of those Australian rules and regulations? Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's maybe too much authority that the government is taking over the hobby? I'm kind of in between. I mean, I like having the freedom that we have in Canada and North America to care for a wide range of species, but at the same time, a big part of me thinks if we had rules and regulations as tight as Australia has, we would have less issues in terms of poor husbandry and improper breeding practices and things along those lines. But what do you think? If you're looking for the show notes for this episode, you can visit animalsathome.ca/podcast. Click on this episode. This is episode number 5. And you'll find all the details that you need, including the book that I had mentioned at the end of the show. That was Venom Doc by Dr. Brian Fry. If you're interested in reading a very exciting and interesting and wild story about a reptile researcher, I highly recommend this book. The link will be in the show notes as well. And of course, the links to Kyle's Instagram page. Are you enjoying the show so far? If you are, make sure you go to animalsathome.ca/podcast. There you can find a few ways to support me. One is a link you'll see called Buy Me a Coffee. That is just essentially a $3 donation that comes my way and helps me pay for any fees, as well as my time for recording this episode. Of course, there's equipment costs and software, as well as server space. You can buy an Animals at Home t-shirt, and we just got brand new shirts in. They're not necessarily reptile related, but I really love the way they turned out. One of them has a really nice dipterocarp tree, which is a family. If you've ever been to the rainforest or looked at pictures of the rainforest, any of those trees that emerge out of the top of the canopy, so those huge, great big trees, those are typically what are called dipterocarps, and that's a family of tree, and I love those trees. So I had a shirt designed with just one big dipterocarp on it. It looks awesome, I think, anyway. I hope you like it as well. And then there's another, just a simple sweatshirt that says animalsathome.ca, kind of a vintage style. So go check those out. $5 for every shirt automatically gets donated to the Amazon Rainforest Conservancy, and a couple bucks is also thrown my way to help me out. And of course, sharing
subscribing, commenting, liking, doing all those things on iTunes as well as YouTube helps me out tremendously. And if you have any episode ideas or show ideas, or you have a guest that you'd like me to interview, please email me at podcast@animalsathome.ca and let me know. Talk to you later.